This podcast is brought to you by Wise, the app for international people using money around the globe. With Wise, you can send, spend, and receive up to 40 currencies and save up to 55% compared to major banks. Plus, Wise won't add hidden fees to your transfer. So whether you're buying souvenirs with pesos in Puerto Vallarta or spending euros to tip your Colosseum tour guide, you know you're getting a fair exchange rate with no extra markups. Join the 15 million customers who choose Wise. Download the Wise app today or visit wise.com/US/compare to learn more. T's and C's apply. Hey y'all, it's Nikki, and I'm here to remind you to go see the Jaws exhibit at the LBJ Presidential Library before it's gone on October 19th. Now, you probably heard that before he wrote Jaws, Peter Benchley was President Johnson's speechwriter. Well, this exhibit is about the journey of Benchley from White House speechwriter to best-selling novelist to devoted conservationist. Don't miss this fascinating look at the story behind the shark that changed everything. Head on over to lbjlibrary.org and get your tickets before it's too late. $300 more in property taxes, drama over who gets a homeless services contract, and regulating short-term rentals. Y'all, our council members have had their hands full these last few weeks. So today on CityCast Austin, we're back with our favorite City Hall expert to break it all down for you. It's Monday, October 6th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with Amy Stansberry, editor-in-chief of the Austin Common. What's up, Amy? Welcome back.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. So it's time for our council update. It's been a busy month for Austin City Council. We've already talked here on the podcast about that $1.1 million logo. And then, of course, we talked about the juicy story about staffers playing constituent bingo. But let's get into some other news. Austin has tried for at least a decade to regulate short-term rentals in town. And after delaying a decision back in February to change the rules around STRs, it kind of seems like they're finally doing it. Are they finally doing it?
Yep, they finally did it. Yeah, so some background or history there. You hinted at it, but yeah, the city has been trying to regulate STRs, as they call them, short-term rentals, but really probably you or I would just call them Airbnbs or VRBOs. But they can't say that technically, but yeah, that's what they are.
Right.
But they've been trying to regulate them for more than a decade. And in 2016, City Council passed rules that would prohibit new STRs in like residential areas that are non-owner occupied. So they tried to ban non-owner occupied short-term rentals, nearly a decade ago. So you could only have, the idea was like, you could only have like an Airbnb on your property if you were truly using it to like rent out a room or.
Yeah, like ADU. Exactly.
Or if you were going on vacation during South by and you wanted to rent out your whole house or whatever for that week. But the court struck that down.
Wow.
Yeah, and said that you can't differentiate between what the city was calling type 1 and type 2 types of short-term rentals. You can't say, oh, you can only have a short-term rental if it's owner-occupied, but not non. They said you couldn't make that differentiation. And that you also couldn't retroactively take away people's licenses. So if people had already been operating a legal Airbnb in a non-owner-occupied house, you can't like take that back from them, is what the court said. So after that, like there was a lot of legal battles and back and forth and hemming and hawing about what's the best way to move forward with the regulations. And it seems like the idea that rose to the top, at the very least, is to collect money off of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at least bring them into like some sort of legal or regulatory structure. Because really what was going on, technically, if you operated an Airbnb or a VRBO in the city, you were supposed to get a license from the city. So like apply, pay a fee, get a license. Nobody did that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nobody's.
Yeah, of course. So Nobody's doing that. A few people were doing it, but it wasn't really being enforced because the city just didn't have the capacity then. There are thousands and thousands of Airbnbs, and if you go, if you look on the website now, you can see they don't list the addresses. So if the city is trying to come after and find Airbnbs, even if they're on the website,
how you gonna find them?
They can't find them.
Yeah.
And people are smart, right? They usually don't post a picture of the front of the house, right? Just like the backyard and the inside. So it can be tricky. And so the big thing that this regulation is doing is first and foremost just trying to making it a requirement that those platforms, Airbnb and VRBO, make it so you have to type in what your license number is in order to have your listing.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, so that be required. And so that makes it so it's way easier to make sure that most everyone that is operating on those platforms has a license, has gone through the process. And that's for two reasons. One, just to make sure we all know what's what. But two, if there's an issue with one of those, the city has the ability and a process now put in place to revoke someone's license. And that if their license gets taken away, the platforms have said they will delist them.
Wow.
Part of getting a license also means that you have to provide, a phone number or contact information for someone who can be contacted quickly. So if there's a noise complaint, the city needs to be able to contact you, the owner, quickly and say, yeah, hey, there's noise, address this issue. And if there's constant complaints, the city might be able to actually take away the license. So that is a big part of what these new regulations are about, is just trying to better enforce rules.
Did they get Airbnb on board?
Yes, Airbnb and VRBO, the big platforms, are on board to list the license numbers, and the city is hoping that will allow them to spend their time, instead of just trying to track down who has an Airbnb, what these properties are, to focus exclusively on enforcement of just trying to crack down on some of these party houses.
And so have they kind of estimated how much money the city stands to gain with these fees and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so there's two parts of this. So one is as of right now, to get a license to operate an Airbnb costs $800. City Council expressed some concern over that high number at the meeting, and they asked city staff to go back and take a look at how to make it easier for people to apply to get a license and potentially reducing that fee. The bigger thing, the money thing, is coming from something they actually did back in February or March, where they worked with the platforms again, the Airbnbs and VRBOs, to have them start collecting hotel occupancy taxes. This is where the money comes from.
That's where the money goes. Okay, yeah.
So before all of this, the operators of these Airbnbs and VRBOs were supposed to be just on their own, collecting these taxes and sending them into the city. Again, people were not doing this.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
There was no real enforcement. So now what already happened back in the spring was City Council passed a rule telling those platforms that they have to collect that money and send it into the city. Way easier, right? So yeah, that means if you go on to Airbnb and book something, you'll see that HOT tax already added on. You're paying for it. It goes straight to the city, done.
Done.
So yeah, so that is the real potential revenue generator, and City Council already passed that in the spring. They were okay, we know we want to do this. And then they had these other rules about the licenses and stuff that they were ruminating on, but they waited because they were not sure what the Texas legislature was going to do. There was some concern that maybe the legislature was going to step in and prevent Austin from doing even that. And so really the focus is about bringing in money and trying to better enforce existing rules.
So there are more than 2,400 active short-term rental licenses, according to city data. But according to AirDNA data, there are nearly 15,000 listings in the Austin area. So that's quite a few listings that we're not regulating or just aware of.
Yeah, so just trying to bring those into compliance is really what these new set of rules is about. It is not really about, though, limiting the overall number.
Stopping.
Now, some of the city's tools for doing that with the really fine grain were taken away by the courts. This idea of, maybe we can only allow some people or some kind of properties to do this. They can't be that finesse with it. And so the majority of council decided then not to limit. Now, some council members, like Councilmember Duchin, was pushing for something more what they have in, I think in New Orleans, where they have a system where you can only have one Airbnb on a block, and it's like a lottery system as to who gets it.
I mean, listen, that would have been awesome. Yeah, because the toothpaste is out of the tube. East Side is covered. It's littered with Airbnbs, tucked in the middle of these streets with families and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was something he was pushing for, but the rest of city council did not go for that. They worried that it would be unfair to say, okay, you only one person on the block gets it, and that means if you have that like extra room in your house that you can only afford to stay in your house because you rent it out on Airbnb, like you can't do that anymore if your neighbor got there first. Now, many people are like, well, that's not how most Airbnbs are operating, but the city didn't want to take away those options. And there have been legal challenges, and there are like ongoing legal questions. Cities that seem to really try and aggressively regulate their Airbnbs just get sued and sued and sued. And I think the city was a little bit over that.
Yeah.
But that was where the debate came in. And in the end, yeah, the majority of council decided not to really try another effort at severely limiting and instead just try and regulate what's there. But that was the debate.
Wow. Okay. Well, we are on our way, evidently, getting closer. At least they're doing something. So there's also been some shakeup around homelessness services. The city is ending its contract with Urban Alchemy, which is huge. And they're hoping to create an emergency contract so as to keep shelters open and operating. So what's going on with that?
This is still like under super active conversation. But basically, all we have right now is a memo from the head of the city's homeless strategy office, David Gray, who said, yeah, their office has decided they want to end the contract with Urban Alchemy. So Urban Alchemy is currently the nonprofit organization that's running the Arch downtown, which is like, you know, what most people think of when they think of our city's homelessness shelter there.
Yeah.
And then also the 8th Street Women's Shelter, which is very close. I think they're like on the same block, actually.
Right.
And Urban Alchemy, ironically, was brought in under an emergency contract only a few years ago to take over the Arch after the Homeless Strategy Office decided to abruptly end a contract with the service provider who had been running it before them because there had been issues there.
Wow.
The organization that had been running the Arch for a very long time, things were falling apart. There was a lot of bad reports coming out of there.
Right. I remember that now.
A lot had been going on with the board and the structure, and the staff was really upset.
Oh.
It was chaotic.
Amy, I forgot about that. You're right.
And so quickly, again, the city was in the situation where, okay, we need someone to quickly fill in the gap, like this isn't working. And quite frankly, they asked a lot of local partners who might be interested in taking over this contract. And I am fairly certain everyone said they weren't interested. If I can recall. And so Urban Alchemy was brought in. This was their first move into Texas. They've done a lot of this in California, but there were concerns at the time because people were like, well, we don't know. This is not a local organization. And there had been mixed reviews from some of their experience in California. But quite frankly, you know, what city staff was saying at the time is like, they're the only ones that applied.
Yeah. Amy, you're blowing my mind a little bit. I did not know this. When I worked at City Hall, we worked with Urban Alchemy a lot in the office that I was in.
Yeah. And so it's tricky. You know, at the time, there were allegations of some issues in their California locations. One thing that Urban Alchemy does, and it's a really complicated issue because Urban Alchemy, they also hire people who have been through the criminal justice system, formerly incarcerated individuals. There's a lot of benefits to that structure and system, right? You're helping people who are getting out of the criminal justice system. You're also hiring people who have lived experience, maybe more relatable. And a lot of people really actually liked what Urban Alchemy did with the Arch. They felt like improvements had been made. The staff seemed happier. The area around the Arch was getting a lot noticeably cleaner. There was some good work going there, but it seems like we don't know all the details. All we've really been told is what was released in this memo, which seems like some staff had been lying or misrepresenting the data about the actual positive outcomes there. So That's the extent of what I know so far. I think more information will come out in future meetings. Council has to now make a choice and enter into a new contract with the new organization to run these shelters. It seems like the Homeless Strategy Office is recommending the same provider that is running the marshalling yard, which is a different shelter here, at least for a year, and then revisit the issue. But I think what this shows is that running homelessness services is really difficult and complicated.
I mean, yeah.
And what we've struggled with, and it's not just Austin, like what many communities have struggled with, is to find the right operators and partners to make this stuff work, especially to run emergency shelters. It's hard work that is like difficult. And yeah, I think that's an area that I'm sure the city is frustrated with and the public is frustrated with. And when these quick decisions have to be made, you can't have the shelter close in the immediate.
Yeah.
So that'll be a longer term discussion about how we find the right community partners out there to operate our shelters.
I guess we'll have to see how it shakes out. Yeah. Imagine this, your next podcast recorded in the same studio where you're hearing this right now. That's Trick Hat Workway. Trick Hat is Austin's most hospitality-driven co-working space. And yes, they've got a pro-level podcast studio designed for creators, teams, and businesses who want high-quality recordings without the stress of hunting down space or gear. Just show up, plug in, and hit record. Outside the studio, Trick Hat's got you covered. From private offices to dedicated desks, they offer flexible co-working options to fit any business or entrepreneur's needs. And can we talk about the perks? Freshly brewed coffee from Manana, endless snacks, and crispy Diet Cokes. But what really makes Trick Hat different is the energy. From weekly networking opportunities to community trick chats, it's more than a place to work. It's where Austin comes to connect, create, and have fun doing it. Whether you're producing your next big idea or just need a space that feels good to work in, Trick Hat Workway is waiting for you, where it's always old Austin, new tricks. Visit trickhatworkway.com to learn more today. So meanwhile, the city is in talks to buy a $3.1 million property near I-35 in East Oltorf for a new homeless navigation center. Speaking of another center. So we have all of these different shelters and all of these different kind of programs. And we do have the Homeless Strategy Office, right? And David Gray, I feel like, he's just incredible. I'm a huge fan of David Gray and just the things that he accomplishes. But we just dealt with a big, huge deficit. You know, we are kind of hurting for money in the city right now. And now they're talking about buying a $3.1 million property. So what is going on with this strategy? How are they able to afford this or even talk about affording this? Yeah,
so this is about what's called a navigation center. And the navigation centers, according to many of the experts, fill a really important role in a homelessness system, super vital. What they do is usually are like walk-up centers, so you don't need an appointment. Anyone can just, show up during the times they're open and receive vital services that help them get on their first step to getting back into housing.
I love that.
And so that can include, basic needs like food, showers, clothes, but then more importantly, they can get into our city's system where you have to basically take a questionnaire, you get interviewed, and you get put on what is essentially the waiting list to get into different city services. That's like step one, you have to do that. You can also, at navigation centers, they'll have what are called diversion programs where you might be able to meet with a caseworker one-on-one, talk about your situation, and maybe you've only been on the streets for a few weeks. They might be able to say, hey, we found this apartment, it's pretty affordable, maybe you still have a job, but something happened, right? Like you lost your apartment, whatever. They can say, hey, we can help you with first and last month's rent. We can help you with that security deposit so you can get in. Maybe you have enough monthly income, but you can't afford that first month rent. They can say, here, we've got money for you.
I love that.
Yeah. So trying to quickly resolve, or maybe they'll talk to you and find out, oh, you have a brother that lives in Houston, but they can't afford the bus ticket to get there. fine, here, we'll buy the bus ticket for you to get there. All of that kind of stuff, even things like medication storage. So a big issue with people living on the streets is they might need medication, daily medication, and they can't keep it on the street. It gets lost, it gets stolen. Sometimes medication needs to be refrigerated. So navigation centers also will sometimes hold those drugs for people that might be keeping them, mentally stable and healthy. Like, you need them to be able to take those medications on a daily basis. So medical care, all of these things at a navigation center. Now, the issue is, right now, the city of Austin doesn't actually have its own navigation center. Our city, as a region, only has one navigation center, and it's called the Sunrise Homeless Navigation Center. It's in South Austin. It's run out of a church, and it was completely that church's choice to open their navigation center. It was something the ministry felt like it was important. And they started providing this vital service that serves our whole city, that the city has started to contribute some money here and there for different programs, but largely donation-based. Like, they just did this and provided this service for free, basically, for the city, So they've been doing great work, but they are located across the street from an elementary school in a pretty residential neighborhood. They used to just really be this church, and now they're also a major homeless service provider. And that's caused a lot of problems with the neighborhood. So the people who live around the area do not, there have been a lot of concerns raised about what having this large navigation center in their neighborhood has meant for them. It's caused a lot of issues being across the street from this elementary school. Sunrise, I think, has really tried to do what they can to work with the community, but this has been like an issue for years, where there's been this back and forth between the community and the navigation center.
Have there been some sort of incidences or something? Have children gotten hurt or scared?
No. I think it's more just the look of it.
We don't want homeless people near our children? What?
There's the look of it. I think less with the kids, but with homeowners who say, they'll wake up in the morning and there'll be someone in their backyard, on the street, like in their front yard. And Sunrise only operates certain hours of the day. They've worked with the police. They're trying to keep the area clean, etc. I've been there a few times. It's not like some terrible they keep it clean and nice. But I think the neighbors probably have a point that having the navigation center there probably brings in more people, because they might need to go there every day. So they might just stay, right, and sleep in those neighborhoods and create more of a burden perhaps on that neighborhood than other neighborhoods, right? And so the city has long been looking for either a new navigation center, a bigger one in a different location, and or multiple navigation centers, so that there's not a single one that's just pulling everyone there. I think, as you can probably see by what's already happening with them, nobody ever wants a homeless services center in their community.
Right. This
is just a fact of the matter. This property the city chose because it's way bigger, it has fencing, they could have more control over it. It's already really close to another shelter in town, but the community has been pushing back against this location, for sure.
That's a shame, because it's like triage for our unhoused neighbors. It's these little things that you need, we can fix quickly. Because, if we think about it, honestly, a lot of people in this city are just one lost paycheck from being in that situation, where they're just I just need enough money to pay first and last month's rent, or I just need enough money to pay this month to keep me from being homeless. And so I love this idea of just kind of this triage. It feels like it's kind of like a first step, a first line of defense.
It's an extremely important program and service that we really need to have. The experts say we need to have this in our community. I think this is what makes homelessness a really tricky topic, is that is something we definitely need. At the same time, I can understand a community being reticent, especially I think the optics here are clear, which is so we're going to maybe appease certain people who live in South Austin, in what is likely a richer neighborhood, and we'll move this to Southeast Austin.
Exactly.
So I think that's at play too, right? This City has a list of reasons, though, of why they picked this location. They spent more than a year trying to find it. You know, this is what works for them, and they were able to get it at a better price and all these things. But I think both can be true, right?
Listen, Amy, I absolutely hear you. And you are not the person that bought the building, but the city is always going to make an excuse for the way that they completely and utterly always mine East Austin resources, period. They're always going to be like, it's cheaper here. This is better for us. We found it. It works. It's a surprise. Nowhere else in the city is as good as this.
Exactly.
And every time it happens, I'm like, sure, man. Sure.
And that's what makes these things so complex, right? This is something we need. You know, this is an important community resource. Where are you going to put it? Is always the question.
Yeah, it's hard. Either way, I hope we get it because I think the service is important and I think it's a great idea, right? I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and it speaks to, it's a key part of the city's larger strategy. Basically, you know, you need a place for people to come. You know, you need a place that, if something happens and someone becomes homeless, they have somewhere to go so that they can get back on their feet as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, we don't have enough night shelter beds for shelters to be that spot. And so the only option is something like a daytime.
Yeah. I hope that the city, you know, invests the same kind of energy in finding places outside of the east side of Austin for things like this.
Oh, yes. And council members have pushed that. You know, there have been proposals also. Yeah. Certain council members have said, well, we should have one of these in every district.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's still definitely on the radar. And I guess one thing I will say on this is not a done deal. Council is going to make a vote in October. So they have not decided this yet. They're trying to allow for some public participation before that vote happens.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of unhoused and homelessness, our council is also working on more affordable housing tools. So right now, Austin has just one homestead preservation district, which is, of course, the East Side, created in 2007. Which supported 385 affordable units in the first decade. Can you tell us exactly what homestead preservation districts are and what the council is hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, there's all these confusing specific rules and stuff behind it, but just to keep it simple, the idea behind them is that in areas that are rapidly gentrifying and property values are rapidly rising, that you have a system, you can create a district in these areas where you basically take that new money, that new tax revenue that's coming in because property values are rising really fast, and you put that aside in a special bucket and reinvest it into programs that allow people who have lived there for a long time to continue living there. So you're basically taking some of the money that's coming from gentrification and trying to put it back into the community to prevent further gentrification and there's all different ways they can do that. But the idea is to preserve existing affordable units, help people stay in their homes. There are a whole bunch of different tools that can be used, but that's the idea. And these were first allowed by state law back, you know, when we created our first one. Then there was like some weirdness with the state law. The city of Austin wasn't allowed to do these for a while. The state changed those rules recently, and so now it's back on the table. And so with what council did is they asked the city manager to look into creating more of these in, I think, Southeast Austin, maybe around the West Campus area. That kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're looking at growing the number of these homestead preservation districts and also, I think, increasing the amount of money that's coming out of them that's going back into affordable housing.
I love this. I love this program.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, it's a good idea. What can you tell us about how council is aiming to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing? You know what I mean? Like, because yes, we're creating these programs, but we're trying to, you know, pump resources and money back into already gentrified areas. But what are they doing? What else are they doing to try to preserve naturally occurring?
Yeah, so this is program one. So this is one of the things they're doing, right? Spending that money to help people stay in their homes, land bank, different things they can do there. Then another thing that council actually recently did is they directed the city manager to look in the idea of creating what's called a housing opportunity fund to preserve this idea of naturally occurring affordable housing. They call it NOAA.
Okay.
Just city speak for, really it just means like housing that is affordable that the city did not have to like invest in, right? It's not subsidized housing. It just is affordable. And usually it is affordable because it's old.
Yeah,
older.
Exactly.
This is how it is. If, you've ever lived in an apartment, like you get cheaper rent usually when the building is a little less nice. Like that's how things go. Mm-hmm. And so other cities have these housing opportunity funds that basically go in and look at properties like this that are a little older, but are not decrepit, right? Are not beyond repair, but are in need of probably some amount of repairs in order for them to continue to last longer, and are really vulnerable to getting flipped, where a private developer comes in, buys the property, slaps some paint on it, and raises rents by like $500.
Yeah.
And what the city is trying to do is prevent that, right? We do not want that to happen. We want to keep those affordable. And so if those properties seem like they might go up for sale or they seem vulnerable for that, to have a fund that could step in and say, we can give you the money you need, maybe a low interest loan or some initiative that you can make these improvements to your property in exchange for guaranteeing that you'll keep the rents at this rate for X number of years. Now, there's a lot of complicated like math and banks and et cetera behind it, but this program has worked pretty well in other cities like Dallas. I think Cleveland has done it. With minimal city investment, you're able to preserve a lot of these properties. And in Austin, this is really key because I think currently in Austin, like 28,000 units are this NOAA, would be classified as NOAA. Mm-hmm. And the forecast is that between now and 2030, nearly all of them will probably be sold if we don't intervene, right?
Oh, shit.
That they're just super at risk for getting flipped and either flipped or bought and knocked down. And so now is the time. I mean, probably years ago was the time, but now especially is the time. And we actually have like an assistant manager who did this in Dallas and created this program successfully. So it seems like we're looking to copy that idea basically here in Austin.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Wow. That's not a lot of time. So they're going to have to get on it. That's going to be here before you know it. Yeah.
And, at the council meeting or as a work session, the assistant city manager who did it in Dallas, though, said they were able to get it up and running within a few months. He said, I can't make any promises here in Austin, but there is possibility to get these programs running fast. So
nice. All right. What do we need to be looking out for? Because we have some voting stuff coming up. What should we have our eye on as we approach voting season?
Yeah, so Prop Q.
Ooh. Oh, what's Prop Q?
Prop Q. So that is, on my favorite topic, budgets, which I've been on here to talk about. Basically, this is our city's tax rate election. So starting October 20th, early voting starts. Election day is November 4th. You can vote on Prop Q, which basically is asking you for permission to raise your property taxes in order to fund the city's recently passed budget. And why this is happening is because state law has a cap, a 3.5% cap. It says each year the city can't bring in more than 3.5% in additional property tax revenue than the year before. And city council passed a budget that breaks that cap, goes above it. And so they have to ask us for voters for permission. And so if it passes, it means the average Austinite median homeowner will see their property tax bill go up by about $300 next year.
Woo.
And in exchange, basically preventing cuts to the city's budget, cuts to social programs, a big expansion of our homelessness services programs, as well as additional funding for things like parks maintenance, wildfire prevention, public health, trying to restore some cuts that have been made by the federal administration to public health.
Wow.
Yeah, those are the things kind of covered.
That's a big one. That we've talked about this a couple of times. That's $300 more. That's average.
That's average. Yeah.
Average.
So it's not.
It could be higher. It could be lower. Yeah. I think it's important to say that too.
Yeah, that's average. And one key thing to note is that's probably, even if this doesn't pass, council would probably still raise our taxes to the maximum allowed, which is still $100. So the difference between the two is about $200. Between passing and not passing. Likely, you can't say that for sure, but
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. I got my eye on Prop Q for sure because I'm like, all right, I know it's coming. I got to be prepared. You guys will probably hear us mention this a million more times on the podcast so that we can prepare you to get out there and vote. Amy, thank you so much for coming. I love our talks. I love that you come every month and keep me up to speed because I feel like there's too much. There's too much to keep track of.
Always.
And I like these digestible bites.
A lot going on.
Thank you for taking the time. Until next month.
Sounds good.
That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Amy's work in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. And you already know, if you really, really love CityCast Austin, support us. Become a neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.